Hello, this is old Mr. Kent of MrKent.com, and I've had some people tell me not to call myself old, and one of my viewers recently said it's a state of mind, and my reply was, well, my feet hurt, my legs hurt, my back hurts, and I can't even remember the rest of the list, which is a state of mind. Anyway, here I am taking off at my favorite flying park. And in my previous video, which I will put a link to in the descriptions, I flew on the same day and the same morning, and I had a prop issue, a warped prop issue, and a motor speed error. And so I followed the instructions and took off and hovered, and this is the second flight. I'm going to see if everything is working. And so what I'll do is I'm just going to be flying around the park. And I love flying around this park. It's pleasant for me. I just like to fly. So maybe you'll enjoy flying around with me because I am going to tell a story. One of my airplane flying stories. When I first got my pilot license, I had a Cessna 150, which would only carry 2 people. And my family lived in Pasco, Washington, which is in the southeast corner of the state, and my wife's parents lived in Lewiston, Idaho, which is about 100 miles as the plane flies from Pasco. And so I would oftentimes fly over and pick up Grandma and bring her back home to stay with us for a while. She just loved to fly in that plane. And I got some other stories about that. Maybe I'll tell that one sometime. But anyway, when I got my Cessna 170, well, then we would fly over and visit Grandma. Oh, there's some, I don't know, I can't tell what those are. They appear to be, they appear to be some kind of bird form. They could be road runners, but I can't tell from here because they do a lot of walking on the ground. Well, anyway, so oftentimes I would fly my family over to visit Grandma. And sometimes, like on the 4th of July, we'd come home at night and watch the fireworks in the different parts of town, of the different towns around. Well, anyway, so this one weekend, we went over to see Grandma, and I think we probably went over on a Saturday morning and spent the day, and then I had to go home that night because the next day I had to teach Sunday school. And our church had 20 Sunday school buses and 20 bus routes, and we'd pick up a lot of kids. And so I'll put a couple of pictures here of my Sunday school class and how I did back then. But anyway, so that Saturday night, well, then we had to leave because the next day I had to be at church to teach my Sunday school class. And what I did in my Sunday school class is I had some helpers. I had 5 or 6 helpers, but I would play the banjo and we'd sing, and then I would usually tell them a story, generally related to young boys and young girls that had something to do with a lesson from the Bible. Because I had 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders, so they fell right into that. They liked those stories, and so I had a lot of fun teaching Sunday school. So it came after we spent the day, all day Saturday with Grandma. Well, then it was dark outside, and we were ready to head back home. I don't remember what time of year it was, but anyway, so Grandma drove us out to the airport, which wasn't too far from her house, the Lewiston Airport, and stayed there while we packed up and got everything in the plane, got the kids in the plane, and then we waved goodbye. And so then closed the doors, and everybody was buckled in, and I start the engine, and then turned on the radio and started taxiing to take off. And of course, you taxi down the taxiway. Got to the end of the runway, and I contacted the tower. And the tower said, well, there's a lot of wind shear in the direction that you're headed, so you may want to put this off till tomorrow. or till a later date because we got wind shear warnings. And of course I had to get back home as always, and so I said, well, we'll go ahead and give it a try and we'll take off. And so they cleared us for takeoff and we took off, and we would fly. Actually, Lewiston is pretty much east of Pasco, and so we would head west, and we had to go up to at least 5,000 feet to go over the northern end of the Blue Mountains, and there was this pass that we always went over, and you could look down at night because at the top of the mountain, it's not that far below the plain, and we could kind of tell where we were when we saw the lights at the rest stop and things like that at the top of that pass. And so we're flying along, and I'm looking, and I'm waiting to see the lights come up ahead of us at about the time they should, and didn't have any lights coming up. And so I kept flying, and pretty soon I looked down, and we were flying sideways. The ground was coming out from under us. It was we were flying the plane was flying right. It was being blown so hard that we were drifting to the right. And so I thought, okay, we got to turn around, get back to Lewiston, because we are not in a safe situation here. I don't even know where we are. So I was planning on doing a 180 degree turn. And so I started my turn and turned my head out the left window to watch for Lewiston to come up, the lights of Lewiston. And I didn't have to look. They were straight out to my left. In other words, we were going sideways and being pushed east, and was not behind us. It was off to the left. And the reason I pause here at this play place is my grandson and I have spent many, many hours over the last 3 or 4 years while I watched him play, and I'd chase him around. We'd have a whole lot of fun in that. So I was just looking at it and going through some memories as I flew the drone that day. So anyway, we just started headed straight for Lewiston. Didn't know whether we were at an angle or not. We just headed straight for Lewiston, and we got to Lewiston and contacted the tower, and they cleared us to go ahead and come in. So we landed safely, and while I tied down the plane, Mama, she took the kids and they went into the FBO and got on the phone and called Grandma and asked her to come back and pick us up, which she did. And so we stayed all night at Grandma's house, and the next morning I had to get home to teach Sunday school. And so we ate some breakfast, and we got up plenty early, and so that I could get back home in time to get to the church and teach Sunday school. And you'll notice I spent a lot of time looking at their playset, because we spent a lot of time having fun there. So anyway, we got in the plane and taxied out and talked to the tower, and took off, and they didn't warn us about anything. And then and another thing, this little, if you followed my channel at all, you know that when I had my Bebop and when I had my Mavic 2 Zoom, this is where I usually set up to take off, and I'd just sit there on the park bench and fly my drone. So anyway, we took off, and we had a terrible headwind. I mean, we weren't going very fast. We were going straight, but we weren't going very fast. And if you have a headwind in an airplane, the lower you get, the faster you can go, because the headwind is less down at the ground because of the turbulence from everything. So we got down to the ground, and we were maybe a couple of thousand feet above the trees and so forth, and we flew all the way, got over to Pasco, and there was a terrible, still had a headwind, and so it's easy to land. And by the way, I had a tail dragger, so it was easy to land, and I came in to land. And then, of course, when it was time to turn and taxi, a tail dragger works just like a windmill, and so the wind kept pushing the tail around, and I was doing ground loops and all that kind of stuff. But we finally got parked, and as we were, I put my foot on the brakes and told my family, my wife and my son, to get out and help tie the plane down. And my son was in the back of the plane and holding onto the tail, and I was holding the brakes on, but while they were trying to tie it down because of the wind. But a big gust of wind came up, and I guess what Grandma tells me is the plane blew, and it didn't run over my son, but it knocked him down and went over the top of him. So anyway, we made it. I got to teach Sunday school that day, and everything turned out the way you would want it to. So here I am. I'm just going to land my drone on the pad because it's fun. I don't mind it. And of course, I want to thank you for watching this video and listening to my story. And God bless.